What's up? Good morning. Happy Sunday. If you are new and you're like, who are you? My name is Morgan. I am the sports nutritionist on staff. Every week I host a nutrition lesson on a given topic, and usually I host them live, but this one's pre-recorded, and they'll likely be pre-recorded for the foreseeable future because Facebook keeps kicking me off of my lives, which is super convenient. So they're going to be pre-recorded for the next little bit. If you are new and you want to learn more about nutrition, a great way to go about doing that is to use the search bar at the top right of the group and search the hashtag nutrition with Morgan. It'll pull up all of my previous lessons as well as any questions that members have already asked and that I've answered. So I've been doing this since last July. There's a ton of free resources under that hashtag, so don't sleep on it. And we'll just treat these lessons, these pre-recorded lessons, just like we did the live. So if you're watching this and you have questions or follow-up, just use the comment section below and I'm more than happy to answer them. So what am I covering this week? It's definitely not like a sexy topic like hitting PRs, supplements, muscle gains, but it's a really important one that will have an enormous impact on how you feel in your body on a daily basis. If you've ever struggled with traveling and feeling like sluggish and just kind of yucky, if you struggle with satiety or fullness, if you struggle with eating before training or training with food in your stomach, this lesson's for you. Basically, if you have a stomach, this lesson is for you. I don't know why they don't cover this stuff in school, but they just don't. So I'm going to play Miss Frizzle this week. We're going to jump on the magic school bus. I'm going to talk about dietary fiber. So this lesson is appropriate for all goals and backgrounds. There's not going to be any mention of like weight or calorie counting. There's a brief mention of satiety and a caloric deficit a little bit later on in the lesson, but that's about it. And just a friendly reminder that this isn't medical advice. I'm not a doctor, so I would reach out to your general physician for that. All right. So, dietary fiber. Here in the States, like in popular culture, gut health is just hilarious. I think of like the yogurt commercials, like the woman who's eating the yogurt and they're like, and it's gonna fix her belly issues. Or the commercials with like the elderly people and the canisters of dietary fiber, like supplements. It's rough. I don't know why it's not talked about more, but everyone needs fiber and it plays a huge role in our health, as well as just how we feel in our bodies. So today I'm going to discuss what it is, how much you need to eat, and how you can work it into your diet easily. So I'm going to start off with the sciencey like part of it. I'm going to try and keep it like very short and sweet because I know like science, like long words, people are like, I don't know what any of this means, I just need to know how to apply it, so we're just going to keep it short. Fiber is technically a carbohydrate. It comes from plant foods, and there's two different like types. There's polysaccharides and then non-starch polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are basically just like a long chain of monosaccharides, which are single sugar molecules, and they're bonded together with glycosidic linkages. So like those single sugar molecules are bonded together, and sometimes you hear like cellulose or gums or pectin. Those would be the bonds. Non-starch polysaccharides are like the woody. I don't know why they use this term in like every nutrition book, every science resource. It's always referred to in English as woody, part of plant-based foods. So think about like the stringy part of celery. That's what the non-starch polysaccharides are. So this is soluble and insoluble fiber. Soluble basically just means the fiber can be broken down into like a gel-like substance. The reason why that's important is because that's what happens after we eat it. So once we eat soluble fiber, it'll be broken down by bacteria in the large intestine, and it slows down the digestive process by delaying gastric emptying. And in doing so, it just helps us feel fuller longer because it slows the process down. It also slows the rate at which carbohydrates are absorbed into the bloodstream, which is really important for blood sugar regulation. And it can help regulate and prevent like major spikes or changes after a carbohydrate-rich meal. It also increases the removal of bile acids by binding to them in the small intestines and can thus help with lowering cholesterol or LDL, like the bad cholesterol. So some examples of soluble fiber just in food would be beans, oats, nuts and seeds, vegetables, basically like the inner part of the fruits and vegetables. Insoluble fiber is essentially the exact opposite. So it cannot dissolve into a gel-like substance. It basically just passes through our gastrointestinal tract completely intact or relatively intact, and it's known for gut motility and increasing the bulk of stool. And the reason why that's important is because, like soluble fiber, it can also help increase satiety and fullness, and also just like push through the food through our digestive tract, so it can help with regular bowel movements. It can also help with reducing the risk of hemorrhoids and preventing gastro-related diseases like colorectal cancer. Knowing all of this, insoluble fiber is like the skins of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains like brown rice, breads, and pastas. So as you probably already picked up on it, those examples, there's some overlap with soluble fiber, and some like foods have a combination of both. So the biggest thing to remember is that dietary fiber is important, soluble and insoluble fiber is important, but if you focus on increasing dietary fiber, your intake of it, like generally you're gonna get increased both soluble and insoluble fiber. Naturally. So how much should we consume? So most people, like just the general public, at least here in the States, don't get enough fiber. It's maybe like 10 grams. That's what I see when I'm taking new clients, very little fiber. General guidance is 12 to 14 grams per 1,000 calories. So sometimes you'll hear the guidance 25 to 35 grams. Oh my gosh, there's like a cricket, 1 second. There we go. Sometimes you'll hear the guidance 25 to 35 grams, and that just basically applies that advice to an average intake of an active adult. So most folks will fall into that range. Basically, you want to look at your overall caloric intake if you know it, and then divide it by 1,000, and then multiply that figure by 12 or 14. You always want to individualize this to you though, so maybe you just prefer on the lower end, you don't experience any like mal effects like bloating or distension. Maybe you have a hard time eating what you need. You might want to shoot for the lower end of that range. Same thing for people, I literally live on a cul-de-sac, and as soon as I start to record these, it's like every truck in Southern California drives by. If you are just starting to focus on your dietary fiber and you realize, wow, I am one of those folks that only gets about 10 grams or 15 grams a day, don't jump to that 35 gram top end of the range, because you might notice some negative symptoms. You want to like gradually increase it to allow your system to adjust. So how is fiber listed on nutrition labels? This is going to vary depending on the region of the world that you live in. This is the USDA requirements here in the States, which are very similar to the Canadian guidelines. The best way to increase your dietary fiber without worrying about nutrition labels is to just increase your intake of fruits and vegetables and legumes and whole grains, and you'll naturally increase your dietary fiber intake. Like I said, most have a combination of soluble and insoluble fibers. But with that being said, it's also important to learn how to read nutrition labels so that you can identify what choices are best for you in the context of your greater intake. So manufacturers can only list naturally occurring fibers that are intrinsic and intact in plants. So those are the ones that are from fruits and vegetables and whole grains, and or synthetic, supplemented, isolated, and insoluble carbohydrates. So I'm going to list off a few examples because you're like, why are you saying these like very technical terms? Because this is one of the more frequently asked questions I get asked by my one-on-one nutrition clients. They're like, why does this food have such high fiber and I don't see any fruits or vegetables or legumes or whole grains listed in the ingredient list? It's because it comes from isolated or synthetic fibers. So that could be like rice bran fiber, potato fibers, xanthan gum, sugar beet fiber, soluble corn fiber, pectin, guar gum, psyllium husk. There's like a whole list. I just picked out the ones that I see most frequently. And then you're gonna see the amount of fiber in the food listed in grams under in the ingredients list. It's gonna be under the macronutrients like carbs, fats, and proteins. It's gonna be on the bottom portion of it. So if you are one of those people that really struggles with fullness or satiety, maybe you want to feel more full on your intake, or you want to feel less full so you can eat more, fiber is really important to consider. It's one of the first factors you should consider aside from energy balance and the amount of food that you're eating. The fact that fiber can increase satiety can be both a good thing and a bad thing, and I'm going to explain a few examples of that, just kind of walk through some everyday examples of it. So you can increase your overall satiety by increasing your fiber intake. So if you are already eating at a maintenance that's appropriate for you, but you just don't feel full, you can look at your fiber intake, and if it's low, like 10 grams, 15 grams, then increase that and see how you feel after the fact. You can always add more food or less food, but fiber intake is really important to consider as well. Just to kind of drive that point home even more, energy and balance is very important, but so is balance. So we can eat processed foods and unprocessed foods, but if you tend to eat more simple carbohydrates, more processed carbohydrates, that can affect the overall satiety that you can achieve with your intake. So if I were to eat all of my carbohydrates all day from like gummy candy, I wouldn't feel as full as if I ate the same amount of calories in whole grains, fruits and vegetables, etc. with some gummy candy. So it'll affect your satiety overall. I'm not saying gummy candy is bad. I'm not saying you can only eat unprocessed foods. It should be a combination of both, and that way you can enjoy the foods that you want, but also feel full and reap the health benefits of dietary fiber as well. Some examples of why this would be a bad thing. It's not ideal right before or during training. So if you were to eat like a big bowl of oatmeal with lots of nuts and berries and lots of fiber in it right before training, it might make training uncomfortable because you have a lot of food in your stomach and it's slowing down that process while you are going to be working hard. So it can just be not comfortable. So you want to keep fiber intake lower before and during training. That's when more simple carbohydrates are appropriate. One of my favorite pre-training snacks would be Greek yogurt and just cereal like Chex. Another example would be if you struggle with eating enough throughout the day, it can kind of be a detriment to that if it's increasing your fullness and you're not getting the amount of calories you need to fuel your activity level because of it. So that's when you might want to shoot for the lower end of your fiber intake or even decrease it below it a little bit until your body can regulate and you can get the amount of calories that you need to feel good. People can also overdo fiber intake to distort their level of fullness. This is pretty popular with people who have a history of restriction. Maybe they are eating large amounts of fruits and vegetables or high fiber bread or protein bars, or adding gums to their smoothies, like you see like protein ice cream and stuff like that all over social media. That would be an example of it. And so they are able to create this sense of fullness on very low calories, but this doesn't always do what people think It does. It's not inherently a good thing. It can make it incredibly difficult to read your body's natural hunger, satiation, and satiety signals. It can negatively impact performance because of the fact that dietary fiber doesn't contribute to muscle glycogen synthesis. So if fiber is so high and carbohydrates are just like moderate or even low, it can affect the amount of carbs that we have available to us in our training sessions. That can, again, negatively impact your performance or your recovery or just how you feel. Context is just important here. So if fiber intake is at a reasonable level and energy balance is appropriate and total carbohydrate intake is high enough to keep glycogen levels, topped off, you're good. But folks that have a history of restriction, or if you're in the tail end of a caloric deficit, it can be a detriment to how you feel. And it can also just create like a lot of bloating and distension if you're eating well beyond what you need for dietary fiber. So you might feel like you're bloated all the time or just like uncomfortable, and that could be a reason why as well. So moving on, we're going to talk about some ways to add dietary fiber into your diet. I like to keep things really, really simple because behavioral change is hard. So I start off with just swapping out current choices with my clients. So if I'm like, or adding to them. So if they're like eating tacos for dinner, I'm like, cool, add some avocado or beans. Really easy way to increase your fiber intake. If you're eating a salad, maybe just grains, maybe throw some cold lentils onto it. If you're eating like a smoothie or oats, you can add nuts and seeds or berries. If you're eating a sandwich or a wrap, add some avocado. If you're eating bagels or English muffins or pastas or wraps, just swap them out for a whole grain choice. You don't have to swap all of them out. It's not that those are inherently better. Again, context matters. If you're already getting enough fiber from other food choices, like go for the white flours, pastas, and whatever. But if you are having a hard time meeting your dietary fiber goal, that's an easy way to do it, is to just swap it out for a whole grain choice. So my favorites are berries, avocado, and just like whole grain options. They don't taste much different. Just like a really easy way to increase your dietary fiber by grabbing like a whole grain bagel or English muffin in the morning and increasing the fiber of your breakfast without being like, I need to eat this and that and like eat more vegetables at breakfast. Nah, like just switch it out for a whole grain choice. So the biggest thing to remember is that fiber can have a huge impact on how you feel in your body, how full you feel, how the meal affects you, digestion. So fine-tuning your fiber intake can really help alleviate a lot of the negative symptoms that people come to me with. As a nutrition coach, they're like, oh, I feel so like sluggish and yucky. And I'm like, cool, what does your fiber intake look like? And they're like, what do you mean? So sometimes you don't need to eat in a caloric deficit or focus on weight loss. Sometimes you just need to focus on the factors that make you feel good in your body and help your body function in the way that it's supposed to. And that could be sleep, that could be water intake, that could be appropriate amounts of food, but it can also be dietary fiber. Just see how that impacts how your body feels before you make any drastic changes. Oftentimes people come to me, like I said, and they're like, oh, I just feel so yucky, and they're eating very sporadically throughout the day. They're not eating enough bulk. They're not eating enough dietary fiber. They're not getting enough sleep and water and stuff. And if they focused on those, which has nothing to do with weight loss or energy balance, they end up feeling so much better. So focus on the big principles first, and then down the line, if that's something that you want to consider, you can. But these principles make a big impact on how we feel, and they're just, people kind of cruise right over. So yeah, just remember that how your body feels is a combination of a multitude of factors and not just fat gain. So if you are coming out of the holiday season, or you just did a lot of traveling or anything, and you don't feel quite right or how you want to feel, just kind of yucky, focus on those big principles first. look at your fiber intake, your water intake, your sleep, the frequency and balance of your meals, and then go from there. Always start there. All right, that's today's lesson. If you have any questions about fiber intake, whatever it is, just put them in the comment section below. I'm happy to answer them. And if you have any requests for future topics to be covered, you can drop those in the comment section below as well. All right, I hope you have a good Sunday, and I will see you next week.